Welcome back to Rhombus Gaming, episode 2 of our Box to Board series, where we're painting the Bretonnian Knights. So before getting started, we're going to try to remove as much of the flashing and mold lines as we can. If you've got a sharp eye, you'll notice I didn't quite get all of it, but I did as best I could before moving on to priming. So for priming, we're going to be using Citadel's new White Scar spray. This is supposed to be their whitest spray they've ever come out with. I've tried it on a few test models, it does look pretty good. I want to go with white because what I'm trying to do is catch that really bright, colorful 90s Warhammer Fantasy look. If I was doing something with my 40K models, I'd be going with something like a Mechanicum Gray or a black to get that grimdark feel, but today we're using White Scar, so we're going to give this a try and see how it looks. So I'm pretty happy with the results of the spray. We've got a nice, consistent, and bright coat on these. The thing I really love about Bretonnian Knights, and these are probably my favorite models in the box actually, is that you can really go crazy with the colors. So if you were to search up images of Bretonnian Knights, you see pretty quickly that they look their best when there's a huge splash of color across each knight. Unlike some other armies where there seems to be more of a consistent image, you know, you've got your Space Marine models where they're all sort of their chapter color or whatever else. Knights really let you play with every paint you might have in your box. So this is by no means meant to be a paint primer. There's tons of YouTube channels out there that you can find that can give you much better advice than I can. But I am sort of trying to make sure I'm following a lot of the general rules of thumb. I am watering my paints down and trying to apply 2 thin coats, which I definitely did not do when I had this box as a kid. There's been a lot of improvements since then in tutorials, but I'm applying 2 thin coats to make sure the white can still pop through, that the colors stay nice and bright, and that you don't get that globbiness you get from applying acrylic paints too thick. Having the right brush for the right job is also another big change between now and when I was younger. I think at the time I tried to paint the whole box with a single brush from the dollar store. You know, doing these small details, doing basing, doing dry brushing, they all require different brush sizes, different brush shapes, and so you know, being able to actually do this now, it's fun to be able to take some of the details like the things around the eyes on the horses or some of the aspects on the knight's shield that I'm going to get to later. Being able to do these with the right tools for the job is also kind of fun to be able to come back to now and do it the right way. My recipe for armor has also changed quite a bit. What I would have done back then would be to paint it all black and then dry brush on this lead belcher that I'm using here. Now, of course, today I'm applying it on directly, and what I'm going to be doing later on is going over it with Nuln Oil. You know, as a kid, certainly you can't afford to buy every single color or every single wash, so you kind of did what you could with what you had. Today, of course, I'm able to put on a few different oils, so I'm going to be using Nuln Oil later on this armor to add the shadows to this layer of lead belcher, and I'm also going to be able to come back later on with some Agrax Earthshade on some of the brown details like the leathers or the horse skin. And while I'm not completely sold on the new contrast paints, I do sometimes find they have their uses. So in this case, I'm going to be using the Apothecary White contrast paint to bring out some of the details on this unicorn top. There's other instances where I'll use something like Talisar Blue on Power Swords in 40K to get a nice little pooling effect, and it brings out the details, almost like a wash, I guess. I'm also going to try some Vallejo paints on the mane of the unicorn here. There's just a couple colors I happen to have around that I wasn't going to go and buy specifically for this model, so I've got a pink here that I'm going to put on the horsehair and try to bring out the details with their purple ink. Like I said earlier, having different brushes for different jobs definitely helps. I don't know if my brush control's gotten much better since I was younger, but I'm definitely able to do a bit more detailing. So on this shield, I've been able to bring out the details of the lion with gold. I'm going to go back over this with a red ink to bring out the recesses, and I'm going to reapply the gold to make sure that the lion details pop afterwards as well. So here's another product I wouldn't have had in the 90s, which is the texture paints. I know myself, and probably a lot of you back then, would have taken some sand and mixed it in with some paint, and that's how you would have got your details. This is just a lot easier to have on hand. You're also less likely to have it flake off afterwards if the sand is too dry. I know I went through it a million times as a kid. So I'm going to be applying some texture paint to the base here. And for anyone wondering out there, yes, I am going to try to go with a Goblin Green paint look. However, because Goblin Green is no longer sold, I'm just going to proxy it as best I can with Warboss Green. There are some videos out there that will show you how to make a much better proxy. I don't have the time for that myself, but you can go look for that as well if you're interested. So here's the final product. I can't say it's quite to the standard I hold myself to on my 40K models, although I think I need to spend a bit more time practicing how to record while painting. Before finishing up, I did dry brush the base with a bit of a mix of yellow and green. I added a few more details on the crown, as you see there. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to come back again in the next video with the Bretonnian archers, so hopefully it doesn't take as long as the last video. If you like this though, feel free to come back and watch that one as well.